Hey everybody, Bonehead for the Bonehead Podcast, and welcome to Blood Bowl 7's rosters Nurgle. This one has to go out to Matthew Ugalde, who has been asking for us to do the Nurgle one for like a whole week, and it's here. Sorry for the delay, we just had the others filmed and lined up. So, we're looking at every team in Blood Bowl 2020, whether it's the rulebook, a Spike magazine, the Teams of Legend PDF, or the weird NAF team, Slann. We love Slann. And we're putting together some of the most fun and or competitive rosters for Blood Bowl 7s from the newer version of Blood Bowl 7s in the Deathzone book. So Blood Bowl 7's got a rules update a little while ago, and we're only just getting around to playing a ton of it and going back and doing all the rosters. Now, we are in full 7s fever at the moment, and Nurgle is not a team that I would recommend for the faint of heart, but it's got some really potent strengths. Anyway, let's have a look at Nurgle 7's rosters. Okay, so Nurgle's strengths, and there are quite a few. Where to start? The Pestigors. Okay, so the Pestigors are a really key piece, and they are an even more important piece in this roster because of one of the vulnerabilities of this team is that everybody is Ag 4+ or worse except for the Pestigors. But the Pestigors make brilliant runners and, quite frankly, brilliant blitzers as well. Now, they don't start with a combat skill. They do start with, you know, the Nurgle skills, which we'll come to in a second. But what they do have is a Beastman stat line. Movement 6 is plenty fast enough for Blood Bowl 7s. In Blood Bowl 7s, there's a couple of key differences. Other than the fact that there's 7 dudes and the pitch is smaller, you only get up to 4 positionals. There's no line of scrimmage, and there's barely any rerolls in it. So what you need are good players doing good things a lot of the time. And these guys here being movement 6 with Ag 3+, and that all-important Horns skill means that Pestigors are more likely than not going to be using that blitz action to make themselves strength 4 to get a 2-die block, to give you that reliable ability to push somebody away or to take down somebody that you're attacking. So the Pestigors, very much like the Beastmen from the Chaos team, become your runner and or blitzer depending on the need for the team. And they are super important in the Nurgle roster because they're the only guys with any speed or any agility, basically. But the rest of the team has got either cheap linemen, who are not very good, but they're okay, or strength 4 and strength 5, which is another great thing about Nurgle here. The bloaters are not fast, but man, they are resilient and they pack a punch. Being strength 4 means that they are great at covering the backfield or punching a hole through, you know, for your reasonably slow team to come through. Now, the strength 4 pieces here, the bloaters, the Chaos Warriors of this team, the Nurgle Warriors of old, they're slow, but they've got that disturbing presence. They've got foul appearance. They've got that regenerate ability. They've got armor 10+. They've got strength 4. They're only Ag 4+, but Ag 4+ can be just fine. Just ask Ogre coaches. In 7s, you're less likely to... No, you're not less likely. You are likely to end up in a mosh pit at some point, but actually you have to work towards it. You have to kind of choose where it's going to be. So the ability for those guys, even at speed 4... You've got 2 of them, they can cover your backfield, and they're likely to be able to get a 2-die block and to get stuck into a place that your opponent is going to really struggle to counterpunch. That high armor, that regen is going to keep them in the game every single time. And being strength 4 and having that foul appearance means that they are going to take some effort to try and hit. So they are slow, but just like Nurgle, the kind of inevitability that comes with them is futile, basically. Now, I've put strength 4 and 5. There is a beast of Nurgle, the Rotspawn. The Rotspawn is basically a troll. Movement 4, strength 5, really stupid, so it does need a bit of babysitting. But it is a chunky boy and can actually give that big hitter for this team. You've got a great choice in strength when you think about it. You've got the Pestigors who can blitz at strength 4. You've got the bloaters who can really do that blocker thing with strength 4 and foul appearance. And you've got the potential to take a Rotspawn as well, who, while he takes a while to get chugging along, once he's in contact, he can be really brutal. Now, Nurgle skills is something I've put here. It's 7s. There's a bit more space, which does, in fact, open up the passing game a little bit more. But on top of that, there's also a lot less rerolls. So when it comes to applying those extra dice rolls or those extra negative to the dice rolls, it really limits things. So the fact that your team here is covered in boils and things that give them foul appearance or disturbing presence, it just makes it harder for your opponent to pull off any kind of shenanigan. And where there's no rerolls, or maybe they're going to have one reroll, it means that actually it applies it so much more often that they're not going to have to work through. If you're playing 11s, a bit of disturbing presence or a foul appearance fail is basically a reroll tax, right? In 7s, it is a turn tax and is basically going to close down your opponent's ability to make stretch plays without you actually having to do anything except put your guys in the right place. And that is a massive strength for Nurgle. But they do have a few weaknesses. I feel like we've covered a lot of them already. Vulnerable on speed. Yeah, the roster being speed 4, 5, mostly, with those Pestigors only being speed 6. It means it is a very slow team. This is one of the slowest tier. Vulnerable agility is what I mean. They've got not a lot of... It's Edge 4+, 5+ for the Rotter, 3+ for the Pestigors. So as you can probably put together, the Pestigors being a rostered positional means you are going to take up one of the spots that you would otherwise give to a Rot Spawn or give to a Bloater to be your hard hitters. So you've got a real difficult balance between good edge and strength and combat. It's a really interesting one. And I put here no sure hands because the team doesn't have sure hands, but on top of that, the positionals are expensive, your edge is low, your rerolls are expensive. It is a really challenging team, but when you can get a couple of bloaters into the right place, when you can blitz through with a Pestigor, it is unstoppable. And this is the beginning point of the roster here. So the 3-4 4+ is where we're going to start. Now, we've got 3 bloaters, 4 rotters, and that takes us to 7 players. That brings us to 485 gold. Now, I haven't filled out the roster because what I want to do is talk through some of the options that you can go for this team, what you can add to this team, because there's a couple of things that have changed in 7s. The access to some of the inducements has changed up a bit, and it's brought in a very cool one as well. So at 485, what you can do is buy a 4th bloater. You can take 8 players and you can have all 4 of your bloaters on this roster. You can add coaches. Now, assistant coaches are really important in this. They're 20k now, but 1 in 6 rolls on the kickoff table is now going to be brilliant coaching. That roll of a 7 that used to be weather is now brilliant coaching, and adding +1 for a coach, +2, +3 if you can afford it to that, basically gives you a 20, 40, 60k reroll 1 in 6 times. So it's definitely worth considering. You can also add a Pestigor to this roster. We just talked about the strength of this roster being the bloated just blockerness of the bloaters mixed with the agility, comparative agility, and just versatility of the Pestigors. So taking your 8th player and being a Pestigor, absolutely, you can do that. You can take another couple of rotters to pad out your roster as well, or you can take, and I've left this roster at 485, a couple of desperate measures. Now, desperate measures are probably my favorite thing about the new 7s variant. They are a cross between the prayers to Nuffle table and special play cards. Basically, if you take one at 50k, you roll a d8 and you get a boon for the game. It can be +1 strength or +1 agility to a guy, maybe. It can be a wizard. It can be really narrative, but it is also very swingy. Now, I've put this 3-4-4+ roster here with just 7 players, just 3 bloaters, and that cash left over, because if you want to play Nurgle, you've got 3 heavy hitters. You can swap one of those out for a Pestigor if you want, and you can still take 2 desperate measures and just trust in the heart of the D8 at that point, and maybe you'll get a wizard, and maybe you'll get one of the other things that trips up your opponent or something. It's a very cool narrative way to play it. If you want to play consistently and with a competitive mindset, then actually the proper thing to do would be to pick up the Pestigor and then fill out any cash left over with assistant coaches. At that point, you've got your roster of 8, so you've got a bench, so if one of your guys goes down, you've got backup, and you've got a good chance to swing a reroll there on that kickoff table. So in 7s, there's a couple of different formats, a couple of different ways to play. You've got league play straight out of the book, which is very much dependent on random skills. Random skills are great, and in 7s, if you're playing a league and you get the random skills, it's a good way to try out some new combinations. If you are playing in an expansion league format like 7 Super Series or a constructed format like a tournament, there's some cool things you can do with Nurgle. So on this roster here, we're leaving out the Pestigores. We'll talk through them in a second. But bloaters are strength 4, movement 4, edge 4. They're blockers. And what do blockers need? Block. Block is the correct choice. However, there's a few other cool things you can do with these guys. Putting tackle on one is brilliant. When it comes to 7s, there's not a lot of rerolls. Block is the best skill in 7s because it keeps you consistently defended and it consistently undefends your opponent. The second skill is dodge because it gives you that integral reroll to, you know, moving, which is always quite important. So having a guy with tackle to cover your backfield is really useful. Even though they're slow, 1 in the middle, 4 squares either wide, it only leaves a couple of squares left on this 7s pinch for you to be able to defend that entire backfield. So if your opponent's going for a fast score and you are able to swing that dude in with a hit with tackle, you're going to be very, very, very profitable. And actually what it does is it's a circumstantial skill. Block is always going to be good. Tackle sometimes is going to be brilliant. Okay, so bear that in mind. Most 7s teams are going to find a way to get dodge onto their roster though. So definitely, I do love having one defender with tackle on my team. Now, guard is going to be great too. This roster here's got some medium meat, right? Strength 4 is brilliant. You're mostly going to be 2-dying most teams. Every now and again, you're going to come up against a chonky boy like a Minotaur or a Rat Ogre or an Ogre. Guard is going to help 2 things. Guard, when you get into the mosh pit, is going to help your rotters be strength 4 and throw 2 dice. The more dice you roll, the less chance of a turnover and the more chance of you hurting your opponent. So generally speaking in Blood Bowl, the less die you roll, the better it is. In 7s, if you do need to roll dice, you get a chance to roll dice. The more dice means you get more choice, and more choice means there's less chance of it going horribly wrong. So guard works really well. You can go with a bit of frenzy, you can go with a bit of mighty blow if you want a bit of removal for the team, but this team really is about controlling the ground. So guard is a good skill, block is the best skill. One piece of tackle on your team, whether it's a bloater, a rotter, or a pestigore, is really solid for defense. The rotters, bless their hearts, if you're running a team like this, you're not looking to brew up a ball carrier anywhere. If you do want a sure hands piece, you might as well put it on a bloater. Rotters are slightly faster, but bloaters being strength 4 gives that inevitability that we talked about. Kick in 7s is a mighty fine skill, and I'll never turn down block on a lineman. Now let's add a bit more speed to this roster. 2 pesty, 2 bloaty, the movie that really needs Vin Diesel. 2 bloaters, 2 pestigores, and 3 rotters. We've got 7 players, 485k. So we've maxed out on positionals. We've hit that sweet spot of 7 players for 7s, and we've still got 115k left over. So everything we just talked about comes into play now. You can spend your cash on a desperate measure and a rotter and an assistant coach and just kind of pad it out, which is decent. You can take 8th man on the rotter. You can then pad out with 60k's worth of coaches if you want to be consistent. Actually, at this rate, can you afford 2 rotters? No, you can't. But, you know, you've got the choice there of how to brew up this roster a little bit better. But what this does do is it brings those pestigores into your roster, and I do like this one. You've got pad when it comes to linemen. You've got 2 pestigores who are able to cover quite a lot of the pitch and also do the blitzing. It gives you 2 people who are able to pick up the ball more often than not, and it still gives you 2 of those hunking strength 4 pieces. Now the pestigores are a bit of a skill sink for the Nurgle team, with good reason. Block is great to make them blitzers. Wrestle is great to make them safeties. Sure hands is great to make them ball carriers. Tackle is great to make them safeties because they're blitzing at strength 4. Or, if you get access to a secondary skill, taking leader on a pestigore is going to sneak that reroll into your entire team. So it's definitely worth considering putting leader on one of your pestigores. This roster here gives you the best access to a bit of speed, a bit of strength, and a bit of choice when it comes to the rest of your roster. But if you love your nurgly big dudes, actually for 590k, you can go max strength here. 1 rot spawn, 3 bloaters, 3 rotters, no agility, no speed, all just oppressive contact, disease, and death. Okay, the rot spawn is going to take some babysitting, but what happens when you've got a big guy and 4 just hulking brutes of blockers? Your opponent is not going to have very many good choices, even if they're a Khorne team or a Renegades team that's got strength enough to overcome you. This is big. Your opponent is not going to have a good angle. If you deploy well, I'm thinking rot spawn in the middle, bloater to the left, bloater to the right, 2 bloaters as linebackers, rotters up close to your rot spawn. Your opponent is their best choice if they want to go for a big blitz is on one of your big bloaters who are very resilient, and that's going to leave both those linebackers of your bloaters kind of in the backfield, one bloater in the backfield basically to be that counterplay. You can just stack them up on the line and just wait for your opponent to come to you, because with this much strength you're gonna have a heck of a crackback. But let's say you want to be a little bit faster than not fast at all. We've got the fast reroll build here. Now you're giving up all of your strength 4 and strength 5 positionals to play kind of mid-range Nurgle. You've got 4 pestigores, 3 rotters, so you've got 7 players, and 1 reroll. This brings you to 545k. There you can add a rotter, buy a desperate measure, add a couple of coaches, or upgrade a pestigore to a bloater for a little bit of a kind of... I'm going to pretend that this is a big guy. This is the fastest roster you can brew up for Nurgle, and it's an interesting one. This is not going to feel like Nurgle a huge amount of the time. It's going to feel a lot faster and a lot more able to do stuff. It's a cool one. It's mid-range. I do like dropping Pestigore 4 and probably upgrading him to a bloater because it does give you a little bit of that kind of Nurgle meat to it. It's going to want... Your opponent's not going to have a lot of good angles because actually with 3 Pestigores and 1 bloater, they're looking at basically a strength 4 blitz coming somewhere across the pitch and there's not really anything they can do about it. Okay, but one of the coolest things about Sevens is the desperate measures, so I brewed up a couple of rosters to just kind of play into that. Nurgle don't have a ton of edge, they don't have a ton of hope, they just have to wait for your opponent to make their play and then you slowly wander in and grind them into death. Bad Edge Desperation has got Bad Edge and a ton of desperate measures. 1 Rot Spawn for your big guy and 6 Rotters to keep him company. You do actually get a reroll with this roster. 490k gives you enough cash left over to either pad out your roster with extra rotters or buy 2 desperate measures. Now, this one is leaning entirely into that desperate measure pot, and sometimes it's going to go well for you, sometimes it's not. Your rotters are going to have to step up and be heroes in this game. Worst case scenario, you have got 1 reroll and you do have that rot spawn to just be an area denial piece. Bad Edge Desperation is not a consistent winner of a roster, but it will be quite funny for an evening. And you can actually tweak it, and instead of taking the Rot Spawn, you take 2 Pestigores instead, and we go with Medium Edge Desperation, 465, 2 Desperate Measures, a Rotter for 8 players, a reroll, 2 Pestigores. It's underpowered when it comes to actually your ability to play on the pitch. You're kind of hoping that those desperate measures turn into really good ones, and there are some really good ones in there, but there are also some really medium ones. And actually, once your opponent has twigged that all you've got is those desperate measures and 2 Pestigores, you can look forward to the Pestigores being stomped on and removed. And my pick for the day would probably be this one, 2 Pesty, 2 Bloaty. No reroll, which is hard for this team, but actually you may be able to sneak leader onto the Pestigore. At this value, what Nurgle can do is just trust in the Chaos Gods. I would probably take 1 desperate measure, take another rotter that would put you to what, 520, and then maybe an extra coach. So a coach, a desperate measure, and an extra rotter to be your 8th player. It's going to give you a little bit of everything. Your bloaters are going to be really good when they get into the mosh pit. And your 2 Pestigores are going to be doing all the heavy lifting, basically, when it comes to, you know, ball carrying, to doing the bowl bit of Blood Bowl. But the rest of your roster, the bloaters are going to do really well, and those rotters are just there to fill in the gaps. This one here, with a desperate measure, with a bench, with a coach... This is a tough matchup for most teams. A bit of that foul appearance, a bit of that disturbing presence is going to cause a little bit of a slowdown for a lot of teams. And what that's going to allow you to do is use your strength and inevitability to just build that mosh pit. And once you get into that mosh pit, your opponent is going to struggle to hit you well, and you're just going to be able to benefit from that strength and that resilience on the way back. Nurgle are kings of the grind, and in Sevens, even though they don't have a lot of rerolls, they can still pull it off. So 2 Pesty, 2 Bloaty. If you've got a Nurgle team, this lovely models, cool paint jobs, get it to the pitch with this roster. Pestigores are going to allow you to play Blood Bowl, and the bloaters are just going to hurt things. It's going to be great fun, and I can't believe I'm saying it. That actually sounds a lot of fun. go Nurgle. Hey, go Nurgle. Anyway, let me know what you think of Nurgle, because it's a divisive one for 7s. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back soon with more Blood Bowl content. Happy blocking. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to help support the channel even further, please like and subscribe, or come join us on our Patreon. We have early access to content. We get loads of feedback from you guys, and we try and do competitions as much as we can. Or you can get yourself some Bonehead podcast merch on our Spreadshirt site. So if you want to support a team, especially for the Bonehead Championship, you can pick up a shirt, a mug, things like that. It all helps support the channel, and we really appreciate it. Anyway, links below. Thank you very much. Happy blocking.